sort of particularly to the people here and the people out in other places who are getting the special versions of these tapes. This was first sort of intended for you, but since we're making all these available to cable, everyone can watch if you're already watching. I wanted to remind everybody that this started out having to do with something specific. And even you people watching this on tape, on your cable station, you can listen in. There was not just meant for public viewing, and it wasn't meant as just entertainment, which is fine. But it had to do, as it always has, with trying to encourage, help, suggest to certain kinds of people, and not based on their behavior, not based upon who they are, but based upon the kind of desire they had that perhaps they had no particular name for, to scratch in a certain place. And it ends up, no matter what it's being called, it ends up dealing with a man's mind. Although at lower levels, more simplistic levels, more everyday levels, people believe it has to do with a man's spirit, his soul, and it gets into religion and philosophy. But it is only one place, which is just obvious as it can be once you see it, that the only thing that you can do of any consequence to a man is here. Although religious people would say almost the opposite and say, well, no, the only thing that can really be touched in a man, then they won't talk about his heart and his soul. But once you see it, it's not that they're wrong, that is just a simplistic version of it. Because there is nothing that will change a man, there is nothing that will come close to satisfying a kind of itch that certain people have. Not everybody, nor is everybody expected to. You're not supposed to. And it is not through physical change, it's not through getting stronger, weaker, fatter, thinner, and it is not through becoming a member of some localized faction. Indeed, there was a Kyroot tonight that I was going to, I won't try to quote it or look for it, but it has to do with all of the institutions of man, all of the fractional parts of men believing that they are identified with a church, a religion, a culture, a race, a political party. All of that, in a sense, is a form of distraction. Life arranges it in such a way that people, if you notice, they will even combine them because it has such power that it's normally would be what ordinary people would consider the more primitive forms of religion, the more orthodox and more conservative forms of religion will, without any hesitation, bring in their national flag, they'll bring in political leaders, and in times past just the opposite. Religious leaders would try to bring the king into church, try to bring a prince into church. Every time, it could seem to start with that if you were a sociobiologist, or if you were a zoologist, if you were a broad-minded city psychologist, you might try and take what we've been calling the primary aspects of man, such as the herd instinct, to make it simple, and say, well, that is the basis of all nationalism, which is all right. You could say that that is the basis of all forms of neighborhoods, that that is a form of all institutions. Again, that's okay. That is not quite it. That is not the end of it. Because, as always, it has run into man's intellectual world, or it could not even be vocalized. We couldn't even be talking about it. And then it becomes even more so that it's not just the herd instinct. It's not that that's wrong. You can say that we have set up ourselves, humans have, into Italians and Germans, into Catholics and into Protestants and into Jews, and you can say we have done it on the same kind of basis that one baboon herd measures out a territory, tries to lay down a territory as being its own, and then will fight over it. That's all right. That does not tell a man much. If you thought you just read it for the first time or discovered it yourself, you would think it was a big discovery, but it is not really definitive, because it is at last an operation of the secondary world, of man's intellect, which is why men, as already been observed, will even do more passionate damage to one another on the basis of religion, for instance, than conflicting baboon herds will. And of course, poets then want to wring their hands and say, oh, man's even worse than baboons, which I personally don't want to get into that kind of argument. Having some relatives on both sides, I'm not going to get caught in the middle of that sort of... Even though it's true, what I'm saying, that it grows out of that, as all secondary affairs of man, in a sense, grow out of the primary world, it takes on almost a life of its own. That is, to identify yourself, an ordinary person is, again, there's nothing wrong, it is quite ordinary. But for a person to identify themselves as, yes, I'm a Jew, yes, I'm a German, yes, I'm a Catholic, yes, I'm Chinese, whatever they're saying, and passionate about it, or even getting into the cultural side that might appear to be professions, somewhere usually outside the real commercial side, like I am an artist, I'm a musician. But I don't keep it simple. Religion, nationality, race, it serves a particular purpose. And if you will, I was going to try to get you to try and divorce yourself, make a gigantic leap in your own mind, and just divorce it from that kind of zoological, biological herd instinct, although that was the origins of it. Take it into the realm of somewhere else. And this somewhere else serves a specific purpose, is it fragments man's mind, but with ordinary, it helps stabilize them. Because ordinary people, if you could reach into their mind, and you could just tear out, inside out, any idea they had, any identification they felt with their nationality, their religion, their country, their culture, their race, if you pull that out, you must know. Look at your own family, your mother and father. Look at your own self at street level. But if you take nice, decent, everyday people and you did that to them, you would have destroyed them. There is no description. I can make up one right quick. You'd look at it and it'd be like somebody just tattered. Not just their clothes, but their spirit, their psyche. And they're just staggering out in an endless desert, and they don't know who they are. It serves from the viewpoint of trying to do something, scratching this particular itch that a few people have. What it does is a form of homogenization. What it does is fracture, for the present, a man's view, his intellectual view, in such a way that he will only look in specific places. Now, it gets more refined, or we can make up any example everywhere you look in life. Every day when you stare and look at something, in a sense, you're identifying yourself. You're trying to stabilize your position so that you do not find yourself stripped, staggering on some kind of endless, featureless desert. But quite specifically, is the very things that seem to be so admirable in life, and which are. We should all be in favor of it. If you're German, you should be in favor of German nationalism. If you're Italian, if you're Catholic, if you're Jewish, whatever it is, if you're ordinary, you should feel, not for your particular one, you'll be better than that, but you should understand that everybody should be defending their neighborhood. Hopefully not physically, it doesn't come to that. If it does, you should move. The other neighborhood. But at least they defend it on the basis, or to the extent that they psychologically are stable. That keeps society stable. That keeps the secondary world stable. But it specifically fragments any sort and inhibits very directly any possible wider view of what's going on in life. And so the very things, if I did not already make it too complicated, the very things that everyone should be in favor of nationalism, racism, not in a negative sense, but pride and identification with ordinary people, with everyone else, your family, everybody around you, you should be in favor of it because it stabilizes the secondary world. It is a sure sign of sanity. But what it does specifically is also fragments any possible and inhibits any possible wider view of what's going on in life. It'd be that too many people are looking over the edge. Life would be going too fast, not because I say so, not because anybody says so. It is simply the way it is, and so obviously life is operating at the right tempo to suit itself. But if too many people could see over the edge, if too many people could see through all human institutions, and when I say see through it, again, it's not negative. It's not that they are a sham. It's not that they are a conspiracy. But if you saw them for what they are, then immediately life would take up tempo. Immediately this song would be double timed. And based upon the way things are, we could only safely conclude that life does not particularly want that, or it would do it. So the very things that stabilize a man, and we're not just talking about everyone else, because it's partly in everybody's nervous system. Whether you get out on your National Founders Day, Bastille Day if you're French, if you're out waving the tricolors, if you're in temple or church or a synagogue or somewhere, it doesn't matter whether you're there, somewhere in you is a feeling of some kind of stability. When you go back to a family reunion, when you pass a flag, when you pass your religious institution, there is something in you. And I don't mean it's not just crude pride, but it's like a feeling of stability. It's almost like a life raft, a life preserver that you can almost feel like, well, it's floating around there. If worse comes to worse, if I really start going nuts, hell, I'll go back to church. I'll go back and try to join the army. I'll get back in the National Guard. I'll go back and live with my mama. Every piece of all human institutions, when it gets to the secondary level, one more time, get past the herd instinct. Not that it's not true. But when you get to a higher level, to a wider view of it, it is meant specifically to fragment the way you view things. It is to keep Captain Irony off of two-way streets. It is to keep a man from thinking, from attempting to run his intellect on energy that is not polarized. Now all of the little stories and jokes that Kyroots makes, like there's one about some man, or Kyroots points out that the more a thing is specified, the more anemic it becomes. And a viewer says, in that case, the revolution must be robust as hell. If it was more specified, you understand now the sense I'm using, specified, specific-fied. The more something is specified, the more anemic it becomes from a complex view. Now just the so-called or apparent opposite at the ordinary level. Things must, to apparently be strong, must be specified. In other words, you must be able to distinguish the difference between, by God, a Catholic and a Protestant, between a Muslim and a Jew, between an Italian and an Albanian, that you must be able to specify it, or else there's no argument here. You must see what I'm talking about. You couldn't be one if you're ordinary. You'd be back to being stripped again, as I was trying to describe. If somebody could come up to you and say, so you think you're an Italian Catholic? Yes, I am. If in some way, right quick, they could make you see, do you realize that's the same thing as a Greek Orthodox? And let's just assume, I'm not going to try it, let's assume that they could do that, then you'd have the person again, as I was describing, just stripped. There'd be nothing left of them. They'd just be staggering around. They would be nuts. There would be sans any reasonable personality. So you must be able to distinguish, not from our view, not on the basis of one better than the other or right or wrong, but you must be able to distinguish that there is a difference between these two. You must see that. Anything other than that is insanity. And so the very thing that keeps the world and ordinary people stable and sane, that is to specify that, by God, I am an Italian Catholic. And then they can get a little more apparent philosophical about it and say, now, the Catholic Church is not always perfect, and I can't say that Italy, politically speaking, has always taken the high road. But by God, that's what I still am, and we're trying. We're all decent Italians here. We're doing our best. The Catholic Church continues to improve, and blah, blah, blah. But they must distinguish that there is a difference between us, between me, and others. That's what makes it strong. You cannot be a good Catholic at the ordinary level. You cannot be a good patriot of any nation unless you're just convinced that there's some distinction. It's not really open to discussion. It's only somebody like us would even talk about it in this way. Because an Italian's going to say, well, there is a difference between me and Albanians, between myself and Bulgarians, between me and Turks. There is. Because if there wasn't, the man would be nuts. He would just vaporize intellectually. So, that makes him strong in the ordinary sense. But now back to that Kyroot. The more, from a more complex view, the more a thing is specified, the more anemic it becomes. Because the more you specify it, the more you have restricted it. And if I talk much more along those lines, it begins to fall into such shadings and relativity that you'd want to think about it philosophically, and it's not worthy of that. It's too good for that. It's not philosophical and it's not relative. It's an absolute distinction. Because what you specify, you weaken. Except the ordinary view, it strengthens it. That an Italian Catholic, must believe that I am an Italian Catholic. I know what it means, and that's who I am. Right or wrong, that's who I am. At least the man's sane. That's an ordinary view. But if you tried to do that, whatever it would be, we've been calling it the revolution. If you tried to do that, I am a revolutionist, and here's what we believe. Hey, forget it. You might say that. Now we're back to not trying to prove a point about the vagueness of it. I was trying to get you to see that there is a there is a literal basis for what can seem to be the non-specificity of this kind of attempt. Because if you put it into a form that that we've got some sort of outline, that we have some sort of rules, that there are things that you should do, you can call it anything you want to. You could make the intro to your you could say, all right, I've been watching this kind of stuff, I've listened to you talk, and I'm going to start the Akron, Ohio chapter of the Neural Revolution. And I'm going to come up, I've listened to all this stuff, and I'm going to put down rules and regulations of what you should do. I've been writing all this down, I've been taping your shows, and I'm going to distill it into like one condensed, hard-hitting page of rules, regulations, suggestions, and I'm going to do it right here. And you might could start some sort of club. You might, for all I know, the local bird watching society could have collapsed, and people are kind of at 6s and 7s, whatever that is, and they might show up and join in your club. But if you did that, what have you got? If there was any potential to start with, you have weakened it. You have made it anemic by specifying it. The attempt is, the word just fits, is to revolutionize your own thinking, not to revolutionize life. And the revolution is in the way you think, as opposed to, if we're back to, for a second, discussing on the basis of the two realms of acting and thinking of acting, of behavior and thinking. And notwithstanding the obvious fact that if you were thinking in a certain way, that there'd be things you couldn't do. Not because I say so, and I'm not going to say what. It'd just be up to you. But to specify something, the only way you can specify it, the only way you can prove you're an Italian is what? By your behavior. How can you prove that you're a Jew? By your behavior. How can you prove that you're a Muslim? By your behavior. Not the way you think. Now, you can say it is. You can say, not only am I a good Catholic, in my heart I'm a good Catholic. Or you can say, not only am I a faithful Belgium, but in my head I think only good Flemish thoughts. You can say that, but that proves nothing, because you can say anything. You can say, Daffy Duck is my cousin. You can say that. You can say, I talk to spirits at night. But the only way you can prove what you are, the only way you can specify what you are, is by behavior. That's the only way that you know Italians. They can say they're Italians. But if you look out and suddenly there's a war breaks out between Italy and Greece, and you see them on the other side fighting with the Greeks, then, and there it is, just at the obvious level. Forget what they said. The attempt to do this, as far as it goes, is the opposite, because there is no way to prove it. There are no rules that you can make. You can sure try. You could sure spend probably many years, as some of you have noticed, is trying to bite your own tongue off to keep yourself from, and I'm sure you hadn't succeeded all the time, but by deciding, well, there's some rules I got to live by. If it helps you, I slipped in one, or I let Kyroot a while back, a few weeks ago, that said that one guy who laughed at rituals actually had some of his own. But he laughed at those as well. Remember that? It's almost impossible. Which should tell you something not about your own weakness, not about stupidity, but about the nature of the human nervous system at this end. Not the end that's in charge of behavior and hormones, but up here, in the place that hardly exists, the penthouse. People up there that, who the hell knows what they're doing? Hormones and behavior try to lob up these hand grenades and these bombs, and even mean well, which is all forms of attempted reformation, conversion. Yeah, I got to straighten out. It's like your hormone. It's like, your liver swelling up, and it tries to hurl up this, message in a bottle that says, cut down on the drinking, and you try to do it. And if you get old enough, up there, the liver gets, draining so much down here out of people on the upper stories, forget the penthouse, just upper stories, that they quit drinking. But you are living in some kind of schmog. I was about to make up a word, a combination, schmuck-schmog. Somewhere in the mid-levels, if you believe, see, that's one of the tricks, is trying to learn to think faster than your hormones wear out. It's to think, well, I finally saw the light, which all of you have got TVs. As you know, all you got to do is nowadays, especially in showbiz, especially music, it seems, your career peters out, and you're over the age of 30 or so, what do? You get religion. And you don't even have to know much about the Bible. Just say, yes, I sing with a heavy metal group, and for the first 25 years of my life, God helped me. All I did was take dope, sleep with women that I didn't even know their names, but God, I straightened out. See, not somebody they're thinking, as is ordinarily the case, could not grow faster than their hormones could wear out. And so, but you've got to be living in some kind of mid-floor, real problematic schmog. If you ever think that by converting, by reforming, it is proof of my new understanding. There was a Kyroot tonight that said, the only people that get reformed are those that are on the bus. A rebel just gets off the bus. There's no way to reform. There's nothing to repent of. That's like saying, well, I should have never been a Catholic. I should have never been Italian. I should have never been alive. But if you try what I was trying to wrap tonight, if you try and specify to yourself and set up rules, which seems to be the only place you can start, you think, well, I got to stand somewhere. If I'm going to try to be different, I've got to do something. And there's nobody that knows anything at the first level, at the first step, can tell you, no, don't do that. Because if you say don't do that, you don't do anything. So you have to make some kind of rule. Just for the sake of speculation, if some of you watching this on TV, if you thought you were interested in this, and you thought, well, there's something to this, then you might make the rule, well, I'm not sure I understand all, but by God, I'm going to start watching, let's say it's on such and such, I'm going to watch it every time it's on. I'm going to change my work schedule, and I'm going to be here and watch it. All right, that's like a ritual. It's like, well, you got to start somewhere. I'm going to do something specific. So you got to start. You got to step somewhere. But after that, some number of steps, then the more you specify something, the more anemic it becomes. And everything in life that is for the welfare of the collective is for the welfare of society, which indirectly, or if you're good, directly, is the welfare of all of us. We should all be in favor of your family, your friends, strangers, being of some specific religion, race, nationality, and a little additional hope, it doesn't cost anything, is that they don't start a fight with your group, the one in which you're there, while you're alive. But you should be in favor of the very things that would cause you anemia. You do not want to be living with trust me, with a group of people, back to my picture, staggering around in your neighborhood, figuratively speaking, stripped in tatters psychologically, psychically, staggering around. And let's say that you live in Protestant Paris. You do not want to be living there, and you get one morning, instead of being surrounded by all these nice Protestantly inclined, just don't have any letters from Huguenots, from the Protestantly inclined Parisians. Rather than that, you look out, and it's these, what is it, Now the Living Dead or something, but instead of the shredded clothes and stuff, it's their psyche. It's the very thing that made them human. You're in the neighborhood now of these people, and they're no longer fanatical blanks, whatever. They're no longer fanatical Protestants. You used to bitch about it, or fanatical Catholics, or fanatical anything. You thought that was something. You look out, and these people don't know who they are. Oh. You're in bad trouble. You could be it. They won't bother with their own feet. They'll eat you. Within a minute, some of you out there get some idea of why I just picked out the word. There's no great, someday I got to trash it, of the revolution. Because it's not a behavioral revolution, not a political revolution, not any kind of revolution you can see, but it is, by God, indeed a revolution, because the very things that you have got to be, if it mattered, in favor of, the very things that you would support in everybody else, nationalism, patriotism, chauvinism, sexism, racism, religiousism, the very things that hold society together that you'd be in favor of, will kill you if you try to do this. Make you anemic then. If that makes you feel better, but one guy already pointed out tonight, he defined a revolutionist as somebody who'd rather be dead than dumb. I don't know whether that qualifies any of you out there to be watching the show. It is a thoughtful rebellion against everything, not specific. You're not rebelling against anybody specifically, anything specifically. It's general, widespread, overall, unconditional rebellion against everything that is sane. Simply for the basis that it's only sane in one direction. That's why life is full of irony. That's why life is full of tragedy. That's why life is full of injustice. That's why life is full of bigotry. That's why life is full of short-sightedness. That's why you're surrounded by chauvinistic, parochial, pinheads, blackguards. That's why. But if you ever got away from polarized thinking, if you ever got away from the very things that stabilize life, you would see Captain Irony head down the street, but rather than come back and bring you back the message that you knew he was going to bring back, like, well, I knew it. He'd go down that street, and he'd never come back. Which I might suggest is one of the basis of those cosmological games of they used to wonder if we sent out this beam of light straight ahead in the universe, if indeed the universe is a closed system and space curves, if you could stand there long enough with that beam of light, finally, as you kept waiting and waiting and waiting, would it finally come around and hit you in the back of the head? That would be Captain Irony going down the street, and you're waiting. He's going down there and see those Greek Orthodox, or he's going down there and see those Lebanese Jews, or he's going down there and see those Irish Catholics, and he's going to come back and he's going to tell me, I know what he's going to tell me, because hell, he's you. Regardless of that man who says, hey, I know you, you're two people, and he said, hey, I know you, you're crazy. And you're not crazy. You're just going to another name if you're ordinary. As Captain Irony's going down that street and bring you back a report. But if you ever got free from that, if you were not that specific in the demands to keep yourself upright, if you didn't need that kind of specified energy, thought energy, then he'd go on that street one time and never come back. Then, by God, you've got to have a good hobby. Was the tape completely out? Okay. Au revoir.